Hello and welcome to Skyline's second episode tonight. I'm Priti. Well, we begin with a question as usual. What happens when the American dream, it turns into a nightmare? Think about the stories we are going to cover today. An Indian origin man is arrested in Florida after allegedly stealing luxury goods worth tens of thousands of dollars. An Indian American politician who spent years attacking Hindu temples and criticizing H-1B visa holders suffers a major political defeat in Texas. And thousands of highly skilled Indians are waiting for US green cards, but they have just received some of the worst immigration news in years. So we have different stories, we have different people, we have different states, but they all are connected by one theme: the changing reality of life in America today. Tonight we will connect all the dots. So let's start with it. Can you imagine owning a luxury fashion store? You spent years building your business. You carefully select rare clothing, luxury bags, expensive watches, and designer accessories. Everything seems pretty normal. Customers, they come and go. Sales continue. Business is running smoothly. Then one day you realize something strange is happening. Items are disappearing. Not one, not two. Again and again. At first you think it might be a mistake. Maybe a counting error. Basically a bookkeeping issue. But then losses keep on growing and growing and growing. Well, this is exactly what happened at a luxury store in Florida. According to police, the man at the center of this case is Dheer Patel, basically a Gujarati resident of Boyington Beach. The allegations are extraordinary. They say Patel did not simply steal once. They claim he repeatedly visited the same store over a period of months, each time allegedly taking expensive items. But here's the part that has shocked many. Police say that he would later return to the very same store and try to sell items back. What a mastermind. Well, think about that for a moment here. Imagine allegedly stealing merchandise from a business and then returning to that business just to make money from it. Eventually, the store owner, he became really suspicious. Security footage was reviewed. Moments inside the store, they were examined. And according to investigators, a pattern began to emerge. The losses kept on increasing. What initially appeared to be roughly about $41,000 in stolen merchandise, it reportedly grew to nearly $60,000 after a full review. Luxury clothing, accessories, high-end products, all allegedly disappearing over time. In the meantime, the store owner, he says he finally contacted police when Patel returned again. This time, officers were waiting for him. Patel was arrested and charged with grand theft. He was later released on bond while the legal process, it continues. Now the court will examine what happens next. But you know the story, it has generated widespread discussion because it highlights something many immigrants they worry about. Every time an immigrant is accused of a serious crime, it attracts a lot of attention. And often people unfairly judge entire communities based on actions of one individuals. That is why many Indian Americans, they are following this case closely because one person's action, it can affect perception far beyond one person. And yes, while one Indian origin name is making headlines in Florida for the wrong reasons, another Indian origin figure is making headlines in Texas after a stunning political defeat. Because let's be honest, sometimes the biggest political losses, they are not suffered by your opponent. Sometimes they come from your own community. Politics can be brutal. One day you are leading a major political organization. The next day you are out. Now that reality has hit Ibrahim George. Now for years, Ibrahim George, he was one of the most visible Indian origin figures in Texas Republican politics. He rose through ranks, he built connections. He eventually became chairman of the Texas Republican Party. Now for many Indian Americans, his rise, it appears historic. An immigrant from Kerala reaching one of the most influential positions in state politics. It sounds like a classic American success story. But the story became far more complicated because Ibrahim George, he often found himself at odds with many members of the Indian American community. He was criticized for comments regarding Hindu temples. He was criticized for his views on H-1B visa, and perhaps critics accused him of remaining silent when anti-Indian sentiments increased in parts of Texas. Those criticisms never completely disappeared. And now, after his election defeat, they have returned with full force. Social media has exploded with reactions. In fact, some Republicans are disappointed to see an Indian origin leader lose influence. Others inside the Indian American community, they are openly celebrating his defeat. Now that alone tells you how divided opinions have become. In the meantime, supporters argue that Abraham George, he stood by his principles. Critics argue that he abandoned the very community that helped shape his journey. And this particular debate, it raises an important question. What responsibility do immigrant politicians have towards communities they come from? Should they defend those communities publicly, or should they focus only on broader political goals? There is no easy answer, but one thing is clear. Mr. Abraham's defeat, it has become much bigger than one election. It has become a conversation about identity, about representation, and about the complicated relationship between immigrants and politics in America. But yes, while Texas debate politics, another group of Indians are facing a completely different problem. And for them, the stakes are much, much higher. Because this story involves careers, families, and dreams that have been delayed for years. Because for thousands of Indians waiting for permanent residency, the latest immigration update, it feels less like a delay and more like a setback. Imagine doing everything right. You study hard, you earn a degree, you find a job, you follow every immigration rule. You pay your taxes, you build a life in America, and then one morning you wake up and discover that your wait for green card, it has become even longer. Well, that is the reality facing thousands of Indians today. The latest US visa bulletin, it has delivered some difficult news, very difficult news rather. The EB1 category, often used by executives, researchers, and highly accomplished professionals, has moved backwards. The EB2 category has become unavailable for Indian applicants for the remainder of the fiscal year. And the EB5 investor category, it has also run into serious limitation. For many people watching this story from outside America, these terms may sound technical for you. But for Indian families living in the US, they represent something deeply personal. Their future, their stability, their ability to stay, and their ability to plan. Many of these individuals, they have already spent years waiting. Some have spent more than decades, maybe navigating the immigration process. Every new delay, it means more uncertainty. Should they buy a home? Should they change the job? Should they start a business? Should they continue waiting? Nobody knows. And that uncertainty, it creates a lot of stress. The problem here, that's simple. Demand is far greater than supply. There are more applicants than available green cards. And Indians are among the hardest hit because of the country's specific limits built into the immigration system. The result is a backlog that keeps on growing and growing and growing. Well, for some families, the American dream, it has not disappeared, but it feels further away than ever. In the meantime, immigration lawyers are now advising applicants to prepare for additional delay. Well, many are hoping that fresh visa allocation later this year, it could improve the whole situation, but hope, that is not certain. And for now, thousands of Indian professionals remain stuck in limbo, waiting, watching, and wondering when their turn will finally come. But if you think immigration challenges are the biggest problems facing Indians in America, think again. Because one Indian H-1B worker is now accusing his employer of forcing him to pay nearly 1 crore rupees just to keep his job. Well, imagine moving to America with a dream. You study hard, you earn a master's degree, you find an employer who is willing to sponsor your H-1B visa. You believe that your future is finally taking shape, and then suddenly everything changes. According to a lawsuit filed in Texas, an Indian H-1B worker claims that he was pressurized to pay nearly 1 crore rupees just to keep his job and protect his immigration status. The worker alleges that he was threatened with immigration consequences if he refused to cooperate. In fact, he also claims pressure was placed on his family. And now, these allegations have not been proven in court. But the case is attracting a lot of attention because it highlights a problem many foreign workers quietly fear. The H-1B visa, it gives opportunity, but it also creates dependency. Your immigration status, it is often connected to your employer. Your ability to stay in America, it can depend on a single company. And when that balance of power that becomes unequal, workers can feel trapped here. Now, for many Indians in America, the story, it feels deeply personal because thousands arrived with very similar dreams. They studied, worked, sacrificed, and they believed talent alone, it could determine their future. But stories like this raise difficult questions. Are some workers being exploited? Are immigration rules creating vulnerabilities? And how many familiar stories never became public? The court will ultimately decide the fact though, but one thing is clear. This case has reopened a debate about the treatment of workers abroad. And yes, while one Indian is fighting for justice inside a courtroom, another story reminds us that India's influence in America, it extends far beyond technology and immigration. Because sometimes India's impact on America, it is not found in Silicon Valley or Wall Street. Sometimes it is found in the clothes worn inside the US Senate itself. Every summer, something unusual happens in Washington. American senators, they put aside their traditional business attire and they wear traditional fabric. Photographs are taken, politicians smile, the media covers the event, and for a brief moment, one of Washington's most famous traditions come to the life. The fabric, it is called seersucker. And here's the fascinating part. This story begins in India. Well, long before it became a symbol of Southern American fashion, the fabric originated on the Indian subcontinent. Its lightweight design made it perfect for hot weather. Its unique texture helped people stay comfortable in extreme heat. Over time, the fabric, it traveled across continents. It reached America, it became popular in the South, and eventually it found its way into the halls of power. Today, senators, they proudly celebrate Seersucker Day. That's right, many Americans see it as a symbol of tradition, but very few realize that the roots of that tradition, it came from India. Can you think about how remarkable that is? An Indian fabric worn by American lawmakers, celebration inside one of the most powerful legislative institutions in the world. Well, it's a reminder that India's influence often appears in unexpected places, not through politics, not through military power, but through culture, through ideas, through traditions that quietly travel across borders and become part of another society. And yes, while one Indian contribution it is being celebrated in Washington, thousands of American workers, they are facing very different reality because another wave of layoff, it is sweeping across corporate America. Because while some traditions survive for generations, some jobs are disappearing faster than ever before. Artificial intelligence, automation, corporate reconstructing, cost cutting. These words are becoming increasingly familiar to workers across America. And now, another round of layoff is making headlines. Well, major companies continue reducing their workforce. From technology firms to financial institutions, businesses are announcing job cuts as they adapt to changing economic realities. For workers, every announcement, it creates uncertainty. Who will be next? Which industry will be affected? And how many jobs will disappear? Perhaps the most important question of all. Is artificial intelligence accelerating these changes or not? Ladies and gentlemen, companies argue that they are becoming more efficient. Investors welcome cost cutting. Executives talk about long-term strategy. But employees often, they experience something very different. Fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, because behind every layoff announcement are real people, real families, real financial obligations, and corporate decision made in boardroom. It can completely change somebody's future. This is why many Americans are becoming increasingly concerned about the future of work. Will technology create more opportunity than it destroys? Or are we entering a period where job security becomes increasingly difficult to find? Well, the answer remains unclear, but the debate that is only growing louder and louder. In the meantime, speaking of debates now, another discussion, it is now spreading rapidly across social media. And wait, this time it involves Indians, civic sense, and questions that has triggered strong reaction online. Because one woman's observation about Indians in America has started a conversation that millions can relate to. A woman from Delhi recently returned from spending time overseas. And what she said next, it sparked a major debate. Her argument was simple though. Many Indians who ignored rules in India suddenly become disciplined when they move abroad. Why? Well, according to her, the answer is not education. It is not money. It is not awareness. Instead, she believes the problem lies in incentives. That's right. She argues that many Indians, they grow up believing that people who break rules, they often get ahead. Whether it is jumping queues, whether it is ignoring traffic rules or bypassing system, there is a perception that following a rule, it can sometimes put you at a disadvantage. As soon as people move to countries where rules are, enforced very strictly, behavior changes. The observation has generated millions of views, by the way, and countless comments. Some people, they strongly agree, others strongly disagree, but almost everybody has an opinion here. Because civic sense, it affects everything: daily life, roads, public spaces, and how societies actually function. Well, the debate is not really about India versus other countries or India versus US. It's about human behavior, and it's about systems that encourage or discourage that behavior. Well, sometimes one social media video, it can start a much bigger conversation, and that is exactly what appears to have happened over here. And while people debate civic sense online, another immigration story is creating anxiety among Indians waiting for permanent residency. Because for thousands of Indian families, one visa bulletin, it has become the latest reminder that green card dream, it remains painful out of reach. Well, for many Indians, the latest visa bulletin, it feels like a bad news. And then came another update. The whole situation looked even worse. The US government has confirmed additional restrictions affecting employment-based immigration categories EB1, EB2, and EB5. Well, for many applicants, these are not just technical immigration terms. They represent years of waiting, years of uncertainty, years of putting major life decisions on hold. Can you imagine living in a country for maybe 10 or 15 years and still not knowing when permanent residency will arrive? Imagine building a career while constantly worrying about paperwork, visa renewals, and changing immigration policies. Well, that is the reality for many Indian professionals today. And every time a new visa bulletin is released, thousands immediately begin searching for answers. Well, has my category moved forward? Has it moved backward? How much longer should I wait? Well, for now, there are very few easy answers. And that uncertainty continues to define the immigration journey for many Indians in America. But our final story tonight, it takes us back to a larger question. What does all of this tell you about the changing Indian experience in America? Well, tonight's story, it may seem very different. A theft case in Florida, a politician defeat in Texas, a green card backlog, an H-1B lawsuit, an Indian fabric celebrated in Washington, corporate layoff, a viral civic sense debate, and immigration uncertainty. But together they tell you one larger story. Well, the Indian experience in America that is changing. For some, America remains a land of opportunity, but for others, it is becoming increasingly challenging. Immigration rules are tightening, political debates are becoming more intense, job markets are changing, technology is shaping careers. And to give you all the updates, we are right here. Thank you for joining me on Skyline. I'm Kriti Athri, and I'll see you in the next episode.